million. Let's talk to James Price, former government advisor. James, a very good morning to you.
Hello, my friend. Much like you, I think we should be checking the water supply into Downing Street, or check what they're smoking, or goodness me, because it doesn't seem to bear any reality, any semblance to the reality that we all know.
Well, we were just watching some clips in the first hour. I can maybe play you a shorter one here now of Keir Starmer standing by his manifesto pledges. And when you listen to them, you would not be forgiven for thinking it's time to call in, you know, the doctors, because he's completely and utterly deluded. Have a look at this.
Mr. Speaker, in their manifesto last year, Labour promised not to increase income tax, not to increase national insurance, and not to increase VAT. Does the Prime Minister still stand by his promises?
Yes.
I mean, it does go on a bit after that, but, you know, I think that may be the first time in history that Keir Starmer has actually answered a question.
He then goes on, of course, to not answer whether or not the Labour Party is planning on instituting a wealth tax, which is pretty scary because we've already seen the highest outflow of millionaires, the highest outflow of non-doms, the highest outflow of actually just any kind of hard-working person deciding to leave the country because they're being taxed until the pips squeak. And so if that does happen again, I think we're going to see total and utter catastrophic meltdown of the country. These are people who, after a whole year in office, haven't realised yet that if you put a tax up, you don't necessarily get more money in, because people will shift what they do, they'll stop doing it, or in many, many cases, increasingly, they'll just leave. And that's what we're going to have. But I don't think people realise, as I think the Conservatives have started to realise, just how bad the economy is going to be over the next couple of years. And it's going to dwarf, I think, everything else, or it's going to subsume every other issue into it as well, because things are going to become so perilous. And that's what happens every time the Labour Party does run the economy.
It does, but this has been absolute record timing, though, hasn't it? I mean, because normally when you look at the Blair-Brown sort of axis, it took them a good sort of 13 years before, or maybe, shall we say, you know, 9, 10, 11 years before suddenly there was an economic crash, which was a worldwide crash, to be fair. And it took them a good, you know, dozen or 12 years or so to reach this point, whereas this lot have done it in 12 months. You know, I mean, everything you look at, which is kind of connected, you know, the front pages this morning saying work doesn't actually pay, you're better off staying on benefits. The Telegraph story saying there's going to be a pub a day closing from now till the end of the year, thanks to Rachel Reeves and her tax raids. You know, the fact that public borrowing has reached such a high extent that, you know, international bodies are now saying you literally can't borrow any more money.
It's enough to make you sit down and cry, isn't it? I mean, the last Labour government, between 1997 and 2001, the reason I think they were okay was that in that first Blair term, they kept to all of the Conservative Party's spending restraints. It was only after that next election they said, right, okay, well, we're just going to do what we want now, let the spending flow. Gordon Brown sold off all the gold, ran record deficits during good years, and so we went into that big global financial crash in such a complete mess. And at least Gordon Brown had like some sort of semblance of understanding how markets worked, kind of grudgingly.
Yeah.
You might have thought that, oh, it's all very distasteful, but at least he understood, surprisingly, how some humans actually want to act and how they want to live, whereas this lot don't seem to have a clue. The bit that really scares me, of course, is we've talked about Rachel Reeves previously, and she's lied on her CV about how much experience she's actually got. Of course, she's still probably the best person they have for that role. Starmer already had to put her in place because his previous shadow chancellor was so hapless.
Exactly.
Who are they
right.
going to get in now? Who are they going to get in to try and run things if they do get rid of Rachel Reeves? Because they'll probably keep her on until the next budget, raise a load more taxes that isn't going to bring in any more money, it's going to damage the economy even more, and then swap her out for somebody else.
Yeah.
What I'm telling people is it's just going to get worse and worse, I'm afraid.
Well, exactly. Look at the choices. I mean, you've got Jonathan Reynolds, the fake solicitor, the man who's currently the business secretary with no experience of any business whatsoever. You can't really give it to him. You've obviously got the likes of Darren Jones, who's Rachel Reeves' deputy, who's kind of tainted by her programme of hopelessness, so there's no point in giving it to him. You could look around at people like Lucy Powell, who's blotted her copybook by being so woke and ridiculous about migrants and about, you know, the whole situation of immigration. There isn't really one person. I've got a theory, and I'm going to put it to you, which will possibly surprise you and might never come to pass. But my theory is that there will be, because we were told yesterday there's going to be some kind of government away day on Friday in which there's likely to be some kind of reshuffle begun, if not sort of, you know, going on through the whole day. My theory is this, right? Wes Streeting has reached an impasse with the BMA, so they move him. They put him into the Chancellor of the Exchequer's office, and they say, right, you're a coming lad. You know, he's got the support of some of the people in Downing Street, like Morgan McSweeney. They move somebody else out into health, so that they can perhaps do a deal with the BMA, because he looks like he's incapable of doing it. And they give Rachel Reeves some kind of honorary position somewhere where she can't do any more damage.
Gosh, I mean, stranger things have happened, right?
Yeah.
And this is the problem when you've got such an untalented team, if that's a word. It's slim pickings. Of course, they might just start giving it all to Lord Hermer, or Lord Hemorrhoid, as you called him earlier on. Which
That wasn't my nickname. Somebody else's. It was quite a good one.
It's quite a good one. Irritating, can't get rid of it. Yeah, it sort of fits, doesn't it? If the shoe fits.
Absolutely.
I think you might be right on this. Wes Streeting seems to be one of the few people with some talent in that party. He's the guy who abolished NHS England, this massive quango. I've worked in politics for nearly 15 years. I've got no idea what NHS England did as separate from the Department for Health. And of course, Wes Streeting is going to lose his seat at the next election anyway, because there are so many Hamas supporters in that seat that he's definitely going to lose it, as are a bunch of other people in that seat. And so we've got all that to look forward to as well. So might as well give Wes one last nice big job before he loses his seat for the crime of being not a rabid Hamas supporter.
Yeah, absolutely right. And what about this migrant deal with Macron? You know, we still don't really know why Macron was given a state visit. You know, we're not great friends with France. We don't have historic ties with them. If anything, we have historic wars with them. You know, and we're not exactly our greatest friend of the European Union, are they? I mean, even I was told last night. I was reading something this morning at his speech last night. Emmanuel Macron at one point urged Britain to rejoin the European Union, and there was a massive round of applause from all of the people in Guildhall. Of course there was, because they're all the same people. They're all Remainers. They still hate the idea that we've left the European Union, hate the idea that Reform are doing well in the polls. They don't know anything other than to suck up to Europe.
Yeah, quite. I mean, it's 1,000 years of English and then British foreign policy, right? If in doubt, blame the French. It's sort of in our national psyche. There's a lot to admire about the French. I think if I were French, I'd probably be happy to be French, because at least they have a level of cultural self-confidence about themselves still, in the way that I'm not sure I'd be that happy to be German, for example. And the French get a few things really, really right that allows them to get everything else so wrong. You can build houses easily in France. Yeah. You have a lot of cheap nuclear power that is really, really important to prosperity. And I think those sorts of things, a couple of bits like that, allows them to
They also have utter contempt for their politicians, which I think we're beginning to have here.
Yeah, that's true. And they also have utter contempt, actually, despite how much Macron goes on about it, for things like the European Union. Yeah. If they don't like a rule, they just ignore it, which is why Euroscepticism is so much lower in France than it is here, where you've just got huge numbers of civil servants who say, oh, we absolutely must do what Brussels say. That's what used to happen. We've got the same thing now with the ECHR. And this kind of migrant deal, I had to make sure that this wasn't satire. Right. That Keir Starmer walked into a room, said, right, Emmanuel, it's going to be 1 in, 1 out. And it left being what?
17 in, 1 out, yeah.
I honestly had to check that wasn't a satire. It's absolutely ludicrous. I mean, this is the guy we've got negotiating for us on the world stage, right? And we've got to go and get more trade deals thanks to Starmer. He's got to go and, as you say, lead negotiations with the BMA and the junior doctors and all these sorts of things. And we are led by absolute clowns. At least Macron has some kind of sense of grandeur and confidence about him, even if I disagree with almost everything he said and done. And he himself, by the way, of course, domestically is a lame duck because he'd lost control in Parliament and is sort of basically just treading water for the next 2 years before probably someone from the Front National or the Rassemblement National, the hard right party, comes in and starts to fix some of their social problems, because we think we've got it tough in Britain. Look at the number of Islamist attacks in France. Yeah. Look at the number of churches being set fire to, including Notre Dame. And they don't say what happened there, but given all the other churches that have been set fire to by Islamists, and the priests who've been beheaded by Islamists, and the people in nightclubs who've been shot up by Islamists, France has a really big problem there. I think their population of Islamists is a lot higher than ours. Yeah. And so the taste of things to come if we don't sort out that problem here.
Well, you remember what happened with the Bataclan all those years back in 2015. You know, there was a town, I think it was in Belgium, which was literally a no-go area for the police. You know, it was basically run by Islamist gangs, and that was where the whole of the Bataclan shooters came from.
Yeah. Do you think we've got confidence that Starmer's going to be able to fix those sorts of problems here in the UK when you're not actually allowed to say mean things on Twitter? But the Labour Party is pushing through, by the way, a definition of Islamophobia.
Yeah.
That will basically brook no criticism of one specific religion. And we know the reason why that is, because the adherents, or many adherents of that religion of peace, are the ones who say, if you criticise us, we'll kill you, we'll chop your head off. Not by far all Muslims, obviously. The moderate majority are probably the biggest victims of crime in that community. But it's one of those things now that Starmer has obviously buried his head in the sand worried about losing half his cabinet at the next election to Hamas parties. We've seen Zara Sultana, that moron, and the magic grandpa Jeremy Corbyn go and try and do their own party. We've got all of these problems to come, and we should be looking at the way that France is failing to deal with them rather than the way that France is failing to deal just with the migrants alone.
Yeah, it is absolutely incredible. So many problems, one after another, just keep arriving, like a sort of conveyor belt of problems for Keir Starmer, and yet he still kind of deludes himself in the House of Commons and tells us it's all going brilliantly. I mean, he actually made, I'm not even going to bother playing it, but he made a little statement yesterday talking about how, you know, business confidence is higher than ever, you know, we're creating more jobs than ever, you know, the economy is the best in the G7. It's like a man who's literally going round and round in circles inside of his own, you know, padded cell.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it's why, although I think that may upset some people here, why I think that reform is not the answer, certainly not yet, because they've got no interest, it seems, in actually thinking about why these things have gone wrong. It's the reason that Farage is riding high right now, because he's able to talk at length about things. And all of that Labour front bench, particularly Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, and that ghastly Bridget Phillipson, the education secretary, who's trying to destroy children's lives, all they seem to be able to do is talk, as you say, Mike, in pre-prepared sound bites, like there's a civil servant off to the side saying, just say this thing, right? That seems to be how it is. They've got no humanity, no understanding of the real world. And we need politicians in an age of social media who are able to actually communicate properly with people.
It's a very cynical way of dealing with things as well, because it's almost as though some spin doctors told them, if you just keep saying it, the stupid people at the back, i.e. the public and the people who vote for them, will just remember that, and then they'll vote for you again. Absolutely shocking. Thank you very much indeed. James Price, an awful lot of common sense coming out from you.